Good afternoon. It is 4:16 Wednesday, December 11th. This is the TDN Writers Room podcast. I am Joe Bianca, Associate Editor of the Thoroughbred Daily News.
I'm Bill Finley, a correspondent for the Thoroughbred Daily News. I'm in a bad mood. Yankee site Garrett Cole. Ugh.
Jonathan Green from DJ Stable, General Manager. And as a Mets fan, I feel your pain, Bill.
Oh, it's bad. Bad stuff for the other 29 teams, especially our Red Sox and our Mets. Ugh.
Brian DiDonato, racing editor at the TDN and managing partner of Franklin Ave Equine.
Every week it's a struggle not to get these guys to talk about baseball, so it's only going to get worse as pitchers and catchers report and all that. All right.
We could talk about Mike Napoli, leading owner at one of the Gulfstream meets, former Red Sox, Texas Rangers. We should have him on the podcast sometime.
Okay.
We could do baseball and horses.
That would be a good green guest of the week.
Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, come on. You asked it, and great guy, but you asked the hockey questions to all the, before you were wearing your Ranger hat. And
So we had a hockey player on the show.
Right.
All right. But nobody
Nobody
cares.
cares.
Nobody cares about hockey.
Get Napoli on the phone and we'll interview him.
Right.
We'll
Right.
grill him, okay?
You're right. Hot stove, much more exciting
Yes.
than hockey. So we'll start this week with a recap of Saturday's Cigar Mile and the big card at Aqueduct. Obviously, the headline story is maximum security. And, as much of an issue as I've had with some of Gary West's nonsense this year and maximum security missing a lot of big dances, I think he cemented his 3-year-old championship with a really powerful performance. And you might take a few points off because the track was playing so kindly to speed, but he just buried the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile winner and really won for fun. Got a 111 buyer, which is easily the tops of his career. So as much as you like to pick at this situation because it's been so, I don't know what the word is. I guess he's taken a very circuitous route to this 3-year-old championship. And
it's been topsy-turvy.
It's topsy-turvy. I didn't want to say that again.
I know.
I was thinking it. Yeah. But yeah, it's been such an unorthodox year for him, and there's been a lot of drama surrounding him. But at the end of the day, when he was actually on the racetrack, he proved himself as a superior 3-year-old to all the other ones. And there's no argument to be had really now.
I totally agree with you. And one of the things, Joe, we were talking about leading up to this race, and actually, for many of these podcasts was, this horse really get the respect that he deserved. And, there's things to not like about the horse. I understand, the owner is not very popular, the $16,000 claimer, the fact that he missed so many big races this year. But the basic premise of this horse to me, or the opinion that I always had all along was, let's not lose sight of the fact this is a very good racehorse. And, even the morning of the Cigar Mile, I was talking to somebody who I really respect, and they're saying, oh, my goodness, the Code of Honor should be 3-year-old champion. I was like, really? Okay, well, maybe I'll change my mind if we see what happens in the Cigar Mile today. But now, the people that were either not fans of his or not on the bandwagon or even critics of this horse, they have nothing left to say. I mean, everybody universally now says, okay, I get it. This horse, drubbed a good field, spun to run, the winner of the Big Ass Fans Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile.
Forgot that part.
Can't get enough plugs in there for our friends at Big Ass Fans.
We're angling for that sponsorship.
Yes, a fellow 3-year-old, by the way, but nonetheless, older horses, won convincingly. What more do you need to see from him? Is he the greatest horse that ever lived? No, but is he the best 3-year-old of the class of 2019 by a mile, if you ask me?
Yeah, I think it's hard to argue with at this point. I can't imagine voting for anybody else.
Yeah, and who cares where he started? I mean, he started for maiden claiming for 16. So what? He won. Okay, if he had won a race at Penn National or a maiden special weight at one of the kind of lower rated racetracks, we'd all say, okay, that was the starting point of where he won. He's just they anticipated he wasn't a maiden special weight winner in the championship meet at Gulfstream. They ran him accordingly, and all of a sudden he started jumping up and picking up. And we even just heard from O'Dwyer that sometimes it takes a little while for horses for the light to go on. That's the commonality of theme of a lot of younger horses. He's showing promise, but we're waiting for the light to go on. So the light went on, and it went on and on and on, and he won. And he won at multiple racetracks, multiple distances, and now not just against 3-year-olds, but against older horses. To me, it's a slam dunk. He's not going to be, overall champion. But 3-year-old champion, to me, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and the thing is, too, I think even if he hadn't been that impressive, I think the main competition has knocks of his own. His Code of Honor got put up via DQ, very controversial DQ in the Jockey Club Gold Cup, and then got drubbed in the Classic. So I don't know that he would have been a champion that everyone would have felt good about either. So he had that benefit of having a topsy-turvy 3-year-old division to eventually come out on top of. Good thing about him, too, is like he's coming back as a 4-year-old. Hopefully he can stay healthy. I think in that way, being by New Year's Day kind of helps us see him more because he's not the hottest stallion prospect in the world with his pedigree. So hopefully he can keep it together. It'll be interesting to see if he's able to run in the Pegasus or if that's too soon. I no knocks on the horse, honestly. Like I thought he deserved to get DQ'd in the Derby. I didn't like that he didn't show up to certain races, but that's not his fault. When he showed up on the racetrack, he handled his business, and I have no knocks on him as a performer. It's just the nonsense cloud around him that's followed him throughout the year that was sometimes hard to deal with.
The other thing about this horse that he probably doesn't get a whole lot of credit for, and maybe should, is when's the last time we've seen a horse this versatile? I mean, if you put him in a month from now in a 6-furlong race, or at least up to 1.25 miles, you wouldn't have any second thoughts about, this is the horse to beat. I mean, if you put him in at 4.5 furlongs at Charlestown, you wouldn't worry about it. He can run any distance of ground. I mean, I don't think he's ever going to step foot on the grass in his career, but that would be interesting as well. But again, at least he's crossed the wire in races as long as 1.25 miles, as short as 6 furlongs. I don't know if he ever ran in 5.5 or something like that. I'm not really sure. We should probably look that up at some point, but at least as short as 6 furlongs, and, shows signs of being able to dominate when he's right at virtually any distance that they throw out there for horses. And that's another incredible factor about this horse. I mean, a lot of respect for Code of Honor, but would you really like him in the 7-furlong Bold Ruler like this horse won at Belmont prior to the Cigar Mile? You'd say, this horse isn't going to go 7 furlongs. And, that's okay. You're grimacing,
This is a personal thing that I really loved his Dwyer. I love Code of Honor's race in the Dwyer. I thought that was the best race he ever ran. But yeah, I mean, I take your point.
And that was what is that?
That's a 1-turn mile. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's a versatile horse. But I mean, most horses start, out at shorter distances and end up being routers. But I mean, again, it's hard to argue with his career, what he's done this year, and I'll definitely be interested to see what he does next year. And obviously, the Pegasus would make a lot of sense for him, given how he's run at Gulfstream.
Yeah, and he we talked about the Derby a lot ad nauseum about the DQ and everything, but he ran a remarkable race in the Derby. Right. Like I don't think we really mentioned that enough to take all that heat to keep going like that. Mm-hmm. He obviously he deserved to come down. He interfered with a lot of horses, but that was a pretty impressive effort, even though he didn't get the money.
And it'll be interesting, too. They have said they're going to the Pegasus, and really they seem to be taking it one race at a time, so we don't know if he's going overseas to, any of those rich races in the Middle East. But, that'll be very interesting as well to see, what kind of campaign they have for him, if they're willing to go over there and try to tackle that money. I'm not going to jump up and down and say this is, the second coming of Secretariat, but, I mean, anything is possible. If we're doing this at this point next year, reviewing his 4-year-old year, and we were to look at that he won 4 or 5 Grade 1 races and earned upwards of $10 million. Would anybody be shocked by that? I wouldn't be.
Well, with the way purse money is now, $10 million would be a disappointment.
Running third in the Saudi Cup,
right?
$10 million.
And don't forget, he's still eligible for the starters as a 4-year-old.
Well, he didn't run in the Claiming Crown.
Exactly.
Which is where he could have run. Yes,
so, exactly. He's got a lot ahead of him.
Yes.
Where do we think he stacks up with some of the better 3-year-olds we've seen? I mean, I don't think he's arrogate. Does anybody?
No, he's not that brilliant, but
right.
I mean, he, even though he ducked, I'm not gonna say ducked, but he missed a lot of races. Mm-hmm. He was pretty consistent, in terms of speed figures and stuff. And yeah, so I think I would say average to above average, slightly above average 3-year-old champion. Mm-hmm. There's definitely been a lot worse champions than him, but I say until this past Saturday, I hadn't seen like a really brilliant performance from him. I think that's the closest thing we got.
Well, I would answer that question in 2 ways. First of all, I mean, obviously you can't compare him to the 2 Triple Crown winners in recent years. And maybe he doesn't quite stack up to a horse like Arrogate. I'll give you that as well. But could he be as good as those horses, Arrogate or any of the other sort of sexier champions of the last couple of years? He might be, but we really don't know the answer to that question because of what they achieved in the Triple Crown races. Well, Arrogate doesn't fall into that category. But, this horse gets, to me, is a peg lower than some of the other horses because of, for the record, he didn't finish in the board in any Triple Crown race. And we know that's not quite, the clear picture or tell the entire story of this. But, I think he could be as good as any 3-year-old champion. Again, barring the elite air that the 3-year-old Triple Crown winners, of the ilk of an Arrogate or those kind of horses. I think that highly of him.
Exactly. I mean, his race record is such that it's relatively bulletproof. The interesting thing that I heard from talking to a comrade a couple of weeks ago about this horse is that, he's doing it all on his own. There's no major farm that's behind him that's standing the stallion that is pumping, tens of thousands of dollars into marketing for him. The trainer, Jason Service, is a phenomenal trainer, but he is not a guy who's getting in front of a microphone. No. Nor is he, readily available to the press because he's a really private guy. He just wants to train his horses. That's all he wants to do. So, and then the only time you hear West recently is about what happened 6 months ago in the Kentucky Derby, and it's negative as far as the way people are perceiving it. So the horse has to do all this on his own. So the fact that we're even talking about him and we're talking about him being 3-year-old champion and everything is really based on what he's done on the racetrack, which is really the way it should be. But it hasn't been that way, I don't think, in the past 5-10 years. There's been a lot of marketing and advertising and politicizing of horses to earn the Eclipse or to get some votes.
Agreed. And so just gonna say, if you're voting against him in the Eclipse category, I hope you've got good legal defense. Gary West might come after you.
Well said.
Just before we move on.
I hope you have good legal defense for what you just said.
Right. Surprised I haven't gotten a letter yet.
It's in the mail, pal.
Hopefully
it'll be certified. Don't time for any certified mail.
But just one thing I wanted to say about when we were comparing him to Arrogate. To me, the most, even though he shattered the track record in the Travers, ran down California Chrome in the Breeders' Cup. To me, the most impressive race of Arrogate's career was in the Dubai World Cup because he missed the break and because he had to adapt to a style he'd never run before and to pass all those horses like that. What do we think would happen if Maximum Security stumbled out of the gate? Do you think he's going to win? I don't think so.
There would be a lawsuit.
Yeah. This is a gate starter. Just get him out of here.
I think your point is well taken. He hasn't really overcome any adversity, and I mean, it wouldn't shock me if he was the type of horse who wouldn't overcome some of that. I mean, he's one of these horses who kind of makes his own trip because he has speed, and it's kind of the same thing we'd always say about American Pharoah and horses like that, that you don't find a lot of trouble when you're tracking the pace or on the pace, and you can, go pretty quick on the front end. But, yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see if he gets a trip at any point or a rough trip.
I think true greatness is defined by how a horse or a person or anybody overcomes adversity. Mm-hmm. And like Bill said, he's been pretty versatile in terms of distance, but in terms of running style, I feel like he's pretty much run the same race every single time. Mm-hmm. So it would be interesting to see if he were to miss the break one day, how he would run. The Green Group Guest of the Week is sponsored by The Green Group, an accounting, tax consulting, and advisory firm specializing in the thoroughbred industry. With more than 500 clients in the horse business, they were bred to save you money. For more information on how they can help you, visit www.greenco.com. Our Green Group Guest of the Week this week is the winner of the Remsen Stakes, the trainer of the winner of the Remsen Stakes, Jeremiah O'Dwyer. Jeremiah, how's it going?
Oh, good, Joe. How are you doing?
Good, man. Thanks for being on with us.
No problem. Good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to start. He's had an interesting little career so far for a horse who's only run 4 times. He debuted in a turf race at Kentucky Downs, then came back to Laurel and won in a sprint, then was stretched out and shipped to Kentucky for the Street Sense, and then was stretched out even further and shipped again to Aqueduct for the Remsen. So my question is, what did you see from him and what have you seen from him from a development standpoint to be so aggressive with him this early in his career?
Well, he just has that physicality, and even when we got him, we always thought he'd be a nice 2-turn horse. Most of the better 2-turn horses, they can win going short, and they have to have that tactical speed if they're going to be competing at a higher level, which I feel he proved he has and can. That's how he won. He won sprinting at Laurel. They went 110 and changed down there. Just had to keep the revs up on him, and to not let the leaders get too far away from him, and I think they won convincingly that day. But then at the same time, when you stretch him out, he relaxes and he can get the distance. And he certainly proved that when he ran into Remsen.
Hey, Jeremiah, it's Brian DiDonato. So I know Raul Reyes bought the horse as a yearling. Were you involved when he was first purchased, or how did you guys come to acquire him?
I was down for the March sale at OBS, and good friend of mine and bloodstock agent Joe Brocklebank. He told me he saw some horses out at King's Equine Farm that I thought I should have a look at. He brought me out there when we down for the March sale, and I had a look at a couple of horses out there, and he was one of them, and I liked him a lot. I went ahead and bought him for some clients when we down there before he got to the 2-year-old sale.
Was there a setback? He didn't make the sale, or
he was scheduled to go to the later sale. He was scheduled to go to April sale.
Okay.
So yeah, I bought him before he went there.
And Jeremiah, it's John Green again. Congratulations on winning the Grade 2 in New York. That's quite an accomplishment. I noticed in going through some of your past history that you worked for Al Stahl, which was what the Green Group Guest of the Week a couple of weeks ago on the podcast. And at the time, it looked like that he was training Blame. Was that part of the interest in Shotsky, the fact that you were there when Blame was with Al and you saw similar attributes in Shotsky?
Well, it is and it isn't. I like the horse a lot. It didn't matter what he was by, really. But then the more I looked at him and the more you compare him towards Blame, he does look a lot like him. His physical stature and his whole demeanour. Blame, like him, was just a very unassuming horse. He's just nice horse to be around and good demeanour. And obviously a class animal. Shotsky is, I don't want to compare him to Blame, but Blame has stamped him, basically. So he does look a bit like him physically.
No, that's good. I appreciate that. And just as a follow-up, Shotsky won the race going, gate to wire, which was an impressive victory in the Grade 2. That day, it looked like the track's bias was more towards front running. I think 8 of the winners that day went gate to wire. What do you say to people who look at Shotsky and say, well, he raced right into the bias and that's why he won, and once the races start getting tougher and longer, he's not going to be able to get away with that again?
I don't think he has to be on the front end or get away with that. He was only 3 parts of a length behind the winner of the Kentucky Jockey Club when they ran in the street sense. So I think his form is pretty solid when you look at those couple of races. Obviously, every 2-year-old running right now, turning 3, is going to have to take a step forward again for their 3-year-old career to compete in those higher level races, and they're going to get tougher as the year goes on. I just feel, I obviously don't know how good Shotsky is just yet or what level he can get to, but I do feel there's more improvement in him. And I think he's versatile in his running style. He doesn't have to be on the lead. But I'm the type of horse, I'd always like to have him in the first 4 or 5 in a race. I think he's comfortable traveling there. I know he gets the distance. I don't want to say he's got a serious turn of foot, but once you have him close enough, he's always going to be right there. And then he's not slow either, as he won over 6 furlongs and ran a good time.
Jeremiah, it's Bill Finley here. Thanks for joining us and congratulations on the Remsen win. And of course, the minute you cross the wire first in a major 2-year-old race this time of year, everybody thinks Kentucky Derby. So why don't you tell us what kind of plans you and the owners have for him going forward? And have you mapped out a road from the Remsen to Churchill Downs for the first Saturday in May?
Well, we have now. We've started talking about it. Obviously, it's exciting. And it is a logical way of thinking and saying you have a Derby horse after winning a race like that. You do get the 10 Kentucky Derby points. So we've been talking about it. We're going to freshen him up a little bit in the sense that we're not going to run him back real soon. I want to give him at least 6 to 8 weeks. So I think we're either going to go down to the fairgrounds for the Lacombe Stakes or back up to Aqueduct for the Withers. They're the 2 immediate races we have in our sights. I'll keep him at Laurel and train him away there as long as the weather doesn't get nasty. I do have stalls below in the fairgrounds, so I can always ship him down there if need be. And if he does go to run the Lacombe, I'll ship him down there when I see fit.
This is Joe Bianca again. John touched on it briefly about your past in training. I just wanted you to maybe give the listeners a little bit of your background and how you got to this point where you can win such a big race after not being in America for that long.
I've just, taken interest in horses and being around and working for good people. I think that's the biggest key, from working with trainers to pin hookers and being around good selectors of horses. The first guy I ever worked for in racing was David Hanley, who currently is the general manager for Winstar Farm. He used to be a trainer in Ireland, and he's just a superb horseman. So just being around the likes of those people, looking at them, asking them questions. Niall Brennan, another huge influence to me since I came to America. Mike Ryan had horses with Niall below and O'Callaghan when I there, and you kind of get to feel of a good horse because you've been around them. So you get to see what a good horse looks like. Then you choose the kind of ones that you think you like. And I've been very fortunate and lucky that I've had some people to support me when I go to the sales and let me buy horses I like. You know, we've never had a huge budget, but I've still been steadily able to increase the quality of the stock we've been able to buy every year, and gives me confidence when I go to the sales that I feel I'm able to select horses that are at least going to be useful and be worth the money that we spend on them. So it's kind of just working for good people and being around good people, being willing to want to learn and improve your own skills.
Jeremiah, digging into your background, I saw that you're a former jockey, and it says that you sometimes will get on your own horses. Have you ever been on shot ski? And if so, what have you learned from being on top of him?
I've been on him plenty, and he's a very laid-back horse. So when you get on him the first time, if I just put any jock on him just to give him a regular gallop, he wouldn't impress them. But he's just a different horse when he breezes now. And especially in a race, he just wakes up, the light bulb comes on. But early on, he's not, he wouldn't set your light being on him. But he just, when you look at him and see him, he has that good presence about him the whole time. Even though he's not doing a whole lot, you can just see that there's more there when you want him. Since he's had a run, like he ran in Kentucky Downs and the light bulb wasn't on, but after that race, he just woke up and started realizing that he was a racehorse and what he was around to do. You know, you get to sit in them, you get a different aspect to measure up. If you see from looking at him on the ground, you get one aspect, and then sitting on him, you get another one. So you kind of get on him, and then hopefully the two of them match up.
Now, Jeremiah, I work pretty closely with a young trainer, Jason Barkley, in Kentucky, and I kind of see some of the pain points he runs into and some of the headaches he deals with building up his stable. What are some of the things that you've kind of had to deal with and overcome as since you've gone out on your own and grown your stable?
So it's basically getting the clients to let you run the horses where they belong. Mm-hmm. If you've got claiming horses, you can't be worried about them getting claimed. You got to usually, if you have them in where you really believe they can win, there is a good chance of them getting claimed. That's why I like going to the sales and buying young horses. You hope there can be nice maiden special weights and allowance horses. And if they're not, then you kind of put them in where they fit, and then they probably will get claimed. But I think that's part of it, and you have to be willing to do that and not be too worried about them getting claimed, because if you don't put your probably legitimate $30,000 horse in for 20, you're going to get beat by a Brad Cox or Mark Cassie who's putting a $40,000 horse in for 20.
Right.
Kind of the nature of it a little bit. But if you have good horses, you can run them in allowance races and stakes races. And they're the horses you try to get. And, you know, Jason does a great job by seeing claiming horses, and his horses always look fantastic. And he's trying to build up his stable, and he's hoping to get some better horses and nice maidens, nice allowances and stakes horses as well. So it's tough, but you just got to keep working at it. And more of them are going to be claimers than they are stakes horses.
All right, Jeremiah, thanks so much for the time, and congratulations again. Good luck going forward with them.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
All right,
thanks.
Appreciate
the conversation.
Take care.
Bye. The Green Group Guest of the Week is sponsored by the Green Group, an accounting, tax consulting, and advisory firm specializing in the thoroughbred industry. As the Green Group Guest of the Week, Jeremiah O'Dwyer will receive a free 1-hour tax consultation. The Green Group, bred to save you money. For more information on how they can help you, visit www.greenco.com. So there's a story that broke yesterday. Bill Finley was on it about a dispute happening between the owners, or one of the owners, and then the other co-owner and the trainer of Stormy Liberal, who was obviously the turf male champion in 2018, won back-to-back renewals of the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. This year has not been a good year for Stormy Liberal. He's 0 for 7. He was a combined 9 for 14 in the previous 2 years. And it definitely seems like his form is going in the wrong direction. He was 8th in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. I think he ran his lowest speed figure in a long time. The dispute is, I mean, this is what's being reported, that Peter Miller wanted to retire the horse, and he had a veterinarian look at him, and supposedly the co-owner David Burnson, who co-owns the horse with Gary Hartunian of Rockingham Ranch, said he wanted to wait until he had a third party look over the horse. And so apparently there has been a long simmering beef between Peter Miller and David Burnson. Gary Hartunian, for his part, says that he's kind of caught up in the middle of this. Without knowing the specifics of the horse and the situation and the nature of the relationships, again, this is the kind of issue where you got to think about more than just your own financial interests. Like these decisions have ramifications nationwide in the sport and in terms of its image. And for a horse who's clearly going the wrong way in terms of form, who was claimed for $40,000, and they've made what, $2 million off of this $40,000 claim. I don't know the specifics of their relationship, but to insist and to now be known publicly for trying to turn the screws on this 7-year-old, about to be 8-year-old horse to try to squeeze a couple more dollars out of him. I think you have to think about more than your own interest in these kind of situations, because what if you do bring him back next year and you have a new trainer and then something happens when he's an 8-year-old? How are you going to feel? How are you going to look? How's racing going to look? And it's the kind of thing that, these petty squabbles or these differences, I think you kind of have to put this stuff aside when it comes to the welfare of the horse. And again, without knowing what's going on behind the scenes, I think Mr. Burnson, you got to think twice about this and think about a larger, broader scope of what kind of effect this can have on racing, to keep running horses that are clearly going in the wrong direction and that have been good to you and that have lined your pockets with 7 figures. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the horse is perfectly sound and he just needs a new trainer and some new programs or whatever. But all signs point to him trying to squeeze a couple more bucks out of this horse that's already given him a lifetime of success.
Well, it sounds like they're going to send him to David Scanlon and have him looked over, and he might not run again. I'd be curious to know what they valued him at.
Can't be a lot.
When they dissolved it.
Yeah,
right?
Can't be a lot. I mean, John, how about you? I mean, excuse me, Brian, interrupting, but I think that's a very interesting point you want. John would be the expert. A horse that's a 7-year-old gelding who's 0 for 7 on the year, $100,000 maybe? I mean,
oh yeah, I think that would be on the high side. I mean, that's it's $100,000 and you're including $50,000 worth of equipment. I mean,
right.
It really but again, it's all in the eye of the beholder, because it's just whatever the two owners feel
right.
like they can agree upon. I wasn't trying to be snarky, but basically it's like it's whatever those two guys feel the horse is worth. But that being said, and Joe, I agree with everything you're saying from a sentimental standpoint. The horse doesn't owe you anything, and there's a lot of times where you would say, okay, economically, what do I need to do? But from a humanitarian, the horse is giving you everything he's going to give you. He's showing to you this year that he is not at the same level that he was in previous years. And I don't think it's because Peter Miller, who I don't know, that he hasn't, turned over every stone to possibly try to get, this horse to compete at the levels that it was competing at before. What I take umbrage in is that these guys are making this public, that Peter Miller sent out, an immediate release to the general public, basically saying, not only don't I agree with this guy because he's taking the horses away, but on top of that, I'm saying that I'm above board by saying that this horse, I would never run this horse again. So if God forbid something happens to this horse again, it's not on me, and I'm making this public knowledge. I mean, that's such a petty squabble that these two guys are having, and I've taken horses away from trainers, and it's not a great feeling. It's not that they're not trying their hardest. Just that sometimes a horse needs new scenery, but you try to work it out ahead of time with the trainer, so that way the trainer's not bad-mouthing you everywhere, because it doesn't just make you look bad, it makes the trainer look bad. Now, how many owners are going to come to a guy like Peter Miller now and say, I want you to train my horses, and because they're worried that when it's their time to fire him or to take horses away from him, that he's not going to do the exact same thing and smear them right or wrong in the, you know, to the general public. That's not a good look for Peter Miller, who's a public trainer.
Can we throw the floor back to Brian because I interrupted him?
I'm sorry.
in
Yeah,
mid-sentence?
we did go
Okay.
off on
You the
a
host
tangent.
now? You the host now?
I
was
don't
about to throw
remember
it to him.
what point I was making, but kind of piggybacking on what John said.
Just how much it was worth, how much the
Right.
horse
Yeah.
would be worth was, you know,
Yeah,
to
I think
circle back.
you know, the numbers you guys were saying were about right. It seems like kind of nobody comes out looking great in this story. I'm sure Peter Miller maybe regrets putting that release out in the first place. When you read Bill's story, I think kind of you really don't know what to believe. I mean, the perspectives are obviously pretty different. I have found just from my own dealings that when horses stop winning is when the things become toxic, and you know everything's great and everyone's best friends when a horse is winning, and then you know they run fifth and then everyone hates each other. So it happens.
Yeah, and it's unclear at this point what precipitated this, whether Peter Miller, they were taking the horse out of Peter Miller's barn and then Peter Miller released a statement, or Peter Miller had told the owners that this horse should retire and then Burnson didn't want to. So it's unclear what happened first chronologically, but it does seem that there's been some bad blood simmering between these guys for a long time, which is crazy because like they just had the back-to-back sprint champion, like,
And they made $2 million
years in
on
a
the one
row,
horse.
like,
Yeah, exactly.
it's egos, man.
Joe, I want to take everything that you said and just say ditto. Very well said. And I agree with every word that came out of your mouth.
Trained him well.
Yes. Thank you. Backing up a little bit, you know, I did write the story for the TDN, and I spent some time. Miller never spoke to the press. He just put out this press release. I was not able to get him, and I didn't see anybody else talk to him. But I did spend quite a bit of time on the phone with Burnson yesterday. And just to give you a little more from what he said in his side of the story, he had two main points. Number one, Miller really didn't tell to him the true story about what happened with this horse. Now, we don't know who's lying, who's embellishing, who's exaggerating, whatever. We don't really know. But he said, look, not only did the guy never say a word to me about retiring the horse until after we told him the horse is leaving your barn and going elsewhere, in this case to Ocala, Florida, he said he tried to enter him in a race at Del Mar after the Breeders' Cup, which didn't go. And, you know, he said, look, this makes the guy look totally full of it to me. His other point was, and on the surface, and I'll say that again, on the surface, fairly reasonable. He didn't say, I'm going to run this horse again. I'm going to drop him in for $25,000 next week. He said, I want to get the horse checked out. I want to see somebody with a new set of eyes take a look at him and just tell me what the deal is. And if somebody tells me, in this case, David Scanlon, that, you know, I really don't think this horse has much left, I will retire him. Now, on the surface, again, I'll use those couple words, you know, that sounds fairly reasonable. But Joe, just like you said, when you think about it, no, you can't do it. And I think this guy sounded very reasonable to me, and I think he's going to come to this conclusion. And you can't do it because of the climate of racing in 2019. If this happened 20 years ago, nobody would really care. You know, they dropped the horse in for 25, a couple of people would squawk or something like that. But he is taking, if this horse were to ever, and the horse could be the soundest could be, you know, maybe the people that look at him now can find a problem and get him back to top form. It doesn't matter. If this horse ever goes in a race and breaks down, there is going to be hell to pay, and this guy's reputation in racing is going to be destroyed. And he cannot, for his own good and for the good of the sport, and it may be unfair, but he cannot do that. And I'm going to write about that later in the week, so I just scoop myself. But he just can't do it. Not in 2019. It just can't be done.
100% agree. And I agree with John and Brian as well that like nobody comes out looking good here. To me, like the individual aspects of the dispute are not really that important. What's important is it appears that this horse is being used as collateral in a dispute between two guys who I assume have big egos. And that's, to me, that's the issue, is that it's almost beside, the horse seems almost beside the point in this story. You know what I mean? It's one guy who has a beef and a grudge against this other guy. This other guy had this thing that he didn't like about this guy from way back, and it's just coming to a head. And no one's really talking about, well, what does this mean for the horse? Like, what is going to happen for the horse long term? And I think in the broad picture of these things, the horse has to come first. And in this situation, it doesn't appear that the horse is coming first. It seems to be about petty differences, and that's got to stop. People have got to bury these grudges and think first and foremost what's best to do for the horse. And it's not always going to be cut and dry. You know what I mean? There are going to be issues. There are going to be times where some people have this opinion, some people have this opinion. But in this case, it's a bunch of airing a dirty laundry, not respecting the fact that they have a champion who pretty clearly is going in the wrong way, and it's up in the air what's going to happen with him going forward.
Another story that we want to touch on is just a few days ago, the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission approved. It's apparently there's still some legal and technical and bureaucratic things that they have to go through, but for all practical purposes, they approved the rule that has been out there circulating among the Thoroughbred Safety Coalition, a lot of major racetracks, that in 2020, 2-year-olds will not be able to run with Lasix in Kentucky at the Kentucky tracks, and starting in 2021, Lasix will be phased out in graded stakes races at the Kentucky tracks. There are a lot of tracks in a lot of states that are talking about doing this, but Kentucky is ahead of the curve, and they're the first ones that have gone this far and got their racing commission to approve rules. And I think one of the reasons why they are doing this is because the 2-year-old races at Keeneland in the spring, Wesley Ward wins every single one of them, but now they're going to ask Mr. Ward to race his horses without Lasix, and I think they wanted this done by the start of 2-year-old racing in April at Keeneland. So it is a monumental change in the way things have been done in horse racing over the last 25, 30 years, and obviously we wait to see what happens next and what are the next moves from other states, et cetera, and what are the next moves so far as even a broader ban of Lasix, like Greg Ferraro talked about right here on our podcast, where he basically said everything's gone, no more drugs of any kind in any races, et cetera, and thought that would happen within 12 to 18 months in California.
I think this is a great first step for unifying the medication rules in across the country. But if this is just a one-off, if it's just, hey, we want to have Lasix as the poster child because that is leading to an issue and horses breaking down, I don't think that's true. I haven't seen a study yet that's proven to me that Lasix is what is the ill of breaking horses down. But again, if this is going to unify the industry and try to get a set of rules, that would be across the country and that everyone would listen to and abide by, and Lasix is the first of many of these drugs that they're going to start to regulate, then as an owner, I'm all for it. And Bill, we were talking before, off air, that it wasn't that long ago where New York wasn't even allowing Lasix, and that was only 1995 is when they actually instituted Lasix being allowed to run. So it hasn't been that long of a period of time of horses not running on Lasix in major circuits. But again, I hope that this is the first of many, and this is a precedent, and not Lasix is what's the bad part of the industry, and that's what's breaking horses down.
Yeah, it seems to be a scapegoat for a lot of people, and that if we could just get rid of this, we'll be on par with the rest of the world in terms of medication. Something I want to add to that, reportedly today at the Racetrack Industry Symposium in Arizona, Todd Pletcher and Bob Baffert both said that they would be in favor of an eventual ban of Lasix, which is a little surprising to see those guys who have been using Lasix for a long time in their storied careers to come out that strongly for it. But it's actually not that surprising because Todd Pletcher, when we had him on, was really, really taking the industry to task, from soup to nuts about what we can do better for horses. So at least in that regard, it's good to see him follow up on that kind of thing. But I agree with John that this has to be a comprehensive approach to medication and racing, and it can't just be one size fits all, get rid of Lasix, we'll be good.
Well, I'd also like to say, to me, a comprehensive approach means something a little bit differently, Joe, is that this is not going to – and look, I've been yelling for 35 years to get rid of Lasix, and I don't think it has any place in horse racing of any kind. But let's shelve that for the minute. What I worry about and what is going to lead to a serious problem is that if somebody is not on board with this, and maybe these guys are all talking to one another, and they probably are, because the kumbaya atmosphere of the Thoroughbred Safety Coalition, where, everybody and their brother was signing on to this, is something we really have never seen in horse racing in a long, long time. Cooperation among a lot of different parties. But if somebody, and I'm not talking about Zia Park or something like that, but if a major racetrack or a major state is an outlier here and says, no, we're going to keep drugs, you can come in, you can race with the Lasix, then that's going to spell a lot of problems for the states that are on board with this. And I even wonder about California, because only they have said in the form of Ferraro that basically this is a step toward getting rid of Lasix altogether. And if trainers are given the option of being able to race in place A without drugs and place B with drugs, well, we know where they're going. And then the people that, whether you agree with them or not, but were thinking they were doing the right thing, are really going to be in a difficult position, and it could really affect their racing product, which is why New York went to Lasix in the first place, because, too many guys were saying, I'm not running here. I'm just going to go run someplace else with Lasix. So, that's the thing. The industry has to, the train has left the station now. The racing industry has to work together, or else this is not going to work, and it's going to create more problems than it solved.
Who are the biggest tracks that haven't signed on to the coalition? Oaklawn?
Well,
Are they?
Yeah, Oaklawn, yes and no, because if you recall, Brian, this sort of happened in two phases. They first came out with the press release back in maybe April or something, where they said, we are a group of racetracks that want to get rid of Lasix, and it's paraphrasing, very simplistic. And then with that one, Oaklawn was on board, as were virtually every major racetrack. I think about the best racetrack you could say that wasn't on board was Parks.
Parks, right?
Yeah, and they'll be the last. That's a casino track where the horsemen run the racetrack. They'll be the last racetrack in America to get rid of Lasix. And Pennsylvania Racing Commission doesn't care. They're completely they're brain dead. They don't care about anything. Brain dead, I'm being too nice, John. They're the worst racing commission in the history, and if you want to sue me, come get me, pal. Worst racing commission in the history of the sport in Pennsylvania. But anyways, okay. So, but then the second go of it with the Thoroughbred Safety Coalition, a lot of tracks, Oaklawn among them, were missing from that announcement. And I don't know what that means. Are they on board? Are they not? But I mean, when it just, and maybe this is unfair, but I kind of think of Oaklawn as kind of, good old boy type place in the South and everything. They're the ones that first came to my mind is, oh yeah, we'll have Lasix, and then just, we'll open the doors and everybody from California will just flood in to run here. That maybe that's a little bit unfair until we see, what their official position is on this. But that's the one that I'm a little bit, what if Oaklawn does this? And, that's going to cause huge problems for other racing states.
And we're already seeing a kind of a flood of trainers shipping in with strings to Oaklawn who have never been there before. Jerry Hollendorf is going. Peter Miller's been there a couple of years. He's going back. Today, Jeremiah Englehart said he's going to have a string there. The other day, Shug McGee, he said he's going to have horses there for the first time. So Oaklawn's an interesting discussion, I think, long term, and how much market share they're going to have in the winter, especially if these tracks start to phase out Lasix and they're holding strong.
But do you think that they're migrating to Oaklawn because of the medication rules, or they're migrating to Oaklawn because they're getting out of New York because of all the Department of Labor issues that are going on?
No, it could be a
or they're
getting
ruled off California.
Yeah, it could be a multiple pronged issue. I'm just thinking long term
Right.
that this is like a snowball going downhill.
I agree with what you just said, but add to that, the purses are
Well,
through
purses
the roof
are-
at the
are
price.
obscene. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, to me, it always comes down to the money. But I do think that you brought up some other issues about reasons why people would want to go there.
As somebody who has most of his horses stabled at Oaklawn, I'm a little nervous for all these trainers to come in, but it's already competitive to me. It's crazy competitive, especially the claiming levels.
Yeah, eventually, you just got to put in a turf course. To me, that's the only thing.
Last time I was
missing.
there, I kind of looked around to figure out if it would fit. I don't know that it'll fit. There's like a hill or something.
Yeah, there's
They're gonna have to-
renovations you can
they'll
do.
have to do a lot.
That's the only thing I don't really like about it. I like betting tracks that have turf courses in the winter. I lied before and said that this was the last thing we were going to talk about. We have a minor celebrity here.
Is this bonus round? Bonus round of the writers' room?
Lightning round. Minor celebrity here. John Green, DJ Stable bought the topper at yesterday's FASIC December winter mix sale. Laddie Liam, son of Golden Lad, who just won by 4.5 lengths in the Maryland Juvenile Futurity Stakes Saturday at Laurel, was part of the Joseph B. Secker dispersal. John, you want to talk about that horse and what made you guys go so hard for him, and then broader impressions of the market?
Well, I can tell you the impressions of the market first, because I think that's a little bit easier. Everything that was at the sale from the racing age sale portion of it was selling beyond what they were worth. There were horses there that were literally last week run for $20,000. They were selling for $40,000. There was a horse that I remember very distinctly in the announcements. They said this horse just ran for $5,000 and is on the vets list at Penn National. Brought $18,000. And you say, why? Is it because, in the past, like I sat through the Calumet dispersal, and you'd say, okay, because people want a piece of the history, or they want a piece of that family that they can't get to. That is no offense to this dispersal, but you're not buying a piece of history. You're not buying into a family that normally you wouldn't be able to get into or afford, at this type of sale. It's just an inventory situation. It's just a situation where, you look at in my opinion, you look at the overnights and there's 6 horses in a race, and you say, why can't you get more horses in these races? Because there's just not that inventory. There's too many racetracks running at the same time. We've talked about that ad nauseum. That being said, it was a very difficult climate to buy anything in. And that's the reason why the only horse that we took a significant run at was Laddie Liam, because it was the only one that we felt, after doing our analysis, where you had a chance to get out on the horse. And that's not to say that $450,000 isn't a ton of money, because it is way too much money to spend on a racehorse. And if we didn't have other people involved kind of pushing the envelope on it, I personally would not have gone that high, even though I feel very strongly about the horse's 2-year-old campaign, and hopefully future campaigns as well. But that to me is the only horse that, when you looked at all of the horses in the sale and where their potential was, it was actually twofold. It was Laddie Liam and Mine Not Mine, who was also a Maryland bred, and those venues race year round. They have very robust breeding programs, and you have a chance to get out on a horse or two like that.
We'll put you in the Green Group Guest of the Week hot seat. What's the plan now going forward with him?
Well, the nice thing about it is that he's run a few times on a couple different distances. We're looking at a couple different Derby prep. We're not sure yet. He is going to New York to Gary Contessa. We're not sure yet if he's going to run in the Jerome or if he's going to run in the Miracle Wood in Maryland. But it's going to be a race of that caliber. It's going to be something along the prep races, and hopefully to continue to show that he can run long and handle these kind of horses.
Gotcha. Best of luck.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Actually, and I would love to say that the reason why we went to the great lengths that we did was just so I could get more airtime on this podcast.
I want a hat. He's wearing the thread of blue hat, which I got one of. I want a Laddie Liam hat.
I'd asked you this off air if you guys had kind of factored in or thought about the idea that, they knew this horse was selling before this race. I'm sure he was, as cranked as he could be to run his best race. If that crossed your mind or concerned you at all? Or
yeah, no question about it. I mean, in a perfect world, I would have loved to have seen him run second or third in the race and not win, where it would have driven the price up. Our friend Chuck Zachney actually owned the favorite in the race, Monday Morning Quarterback, and had to scratch that morning due to a temperature and a virus, and that really set up the race for Laddie. And I think that's part of the reason. But they were very involved in trying to make sure the horse would be the leading contender for the 2-year-old Maryland bred. That was the last Maryland bred race that was still on the calendar, and I know they did have him cranked up for it. That being said, there's no reason to think that he won't be able to go 2 turns, or greater distances as they avail themselves down the schedule.
Does this mean you might be getting a Maryland bred statue to go with your Eclipse statue and your Michigan bred horse
for the Kalamazoo? You have a good memory, man. That's scary.
Because you said it was in a Denny's. I always remember that. That was a good line.
But yeah, I would think that if he is the 2-year-old Maryland bred of the year, that we would have to give the trophy to the owner that campaigned him during the year. It would only be fair. If there's any monetary purse, we would take that. But the statue, that the trophy can go to Joe.
All right, so that's going to do it for this week's edition of the TDN Writers Room podcast. I want to thank Bill Finley, John Green, Brian DiDonato, and our Green Group guest of the week, Jeremiah O'Dwyer. We will see you next week for our last show of the year. Tune in. Bye.